when a woman in torn, battered clothes walked into the most expensive hotel in the city. Everyone laughed. The concierge adjusted his cufflinks and pretended she wasn't there. Two guests near the atrium bar nudged each other and whispered behind crystal flutes of champagne. The front desk clerk, a woman with porcelain skin and a rehearsed smile, looked past her the way you look past a stain on the wall. She simply refused to acknowledge that the woman existed. The floor manager called security. They all assumed the same thing. She was homeless, confused, possibly on something. A woman who had wandered in from the rain, looking for a warm lobby and a bathroom she could lock behind her. It happened sometimes, not often at the Belhavet, one of the top 5 luxury hotels on the eastern seaboard, but it happened. And when it did, there was a protocol. Quiet, efficient, no scene. Except they were all making a mistake that would cost some of them their careers, and one of them far more than that. The Belhavet Hotel occupied an entire block of downtown Richmond, Virginia, its facade a wall of pale limestone and floor-to-ceiling glass that reflected the city back at itself, like a mirror that only showed what was beautiful. Inside, the lobby stretched wide and tall, 3 stories of open air, crowned by a geometric skylight that scattered afternoon light across floors of dove-gray marble so polished they held your reflection like still water. Everything was deliberate. The temperature was kept at exactly 68 degrees. The ambient music, something between jazz and nothing, was calibrated to be felt rather than heard. The floral arrangements on the central table cost $1,100 and were replaced every 48 hours. Even the air smelled expensive. Bergamot, white cedar, a trace of something leather-bound. It was a Wednesday in late October, 3:14 in the afternoon. The woman came through the revolving doors. She didn't stumble. She didn't look around with the wide, roaming eyes of someone who had never been in a place like this. She walked in with the kind of deliberate, rigid control that comes from holding yourself together by sheer will. One foot in front of the other, spine straight, chin level. The way you walk when you know that if you stop, you'll fall. She was maybe 28. It was hard to tell. Her dark hair, thick and long, the kind that would have been striking clean, hung in matted clumps over one shoulder, damp from the rain outside. Her clothes were wrong, not just cheap, damaged. She wore a gray sweatshirt 2 sizes too large, the kind you get at a gas station or a donation bin, torn at the left sleeve where the seam had given up entirely. Beneath it, dark jeans smeared with something rust-colored at the knee. Her shoes were men's sneakers, too big, laces knotted tight to keep them on, but it was her face that should have told them something. Her left cheekbone was swollen, the skin beneath her eye, a sickly gradient of purple and yellow-green. There was a cut along her jawline, scabbed over but recent. Her lower lip was split, healing badly. These were not the marks of carelessness. They were the marks of precision. No one looked closely enough to notice. Cordell Haight noticed her first. He was the afternoon floor manager at the Belhavet, a man of 43 who had spent the last 11 years climbing through the hotel's hierarchy with the patient ruthlessness of ivy covering a wall. He was slim, always impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that he paired with ties in muted jewel tones. And he possessed a voice that could shift from warm to glacial without changing volume. He was the kind of man who smiled when he was angry. The kind who said, "Of course," when he meant absolutely not. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. He simply made you understand, through the architecture of his silence, that you were beneath the conversation. Cordell was standing near the concierge alcove, reviewing the evening's VIP arrivals on his tablet. When the woman entered, he looked up. His eyes tracked her across the lobby, the way a cat tracks a mouse. Not with hunger, but with a calm, predatory assessment. He said nothing at first. He watched. The woman walked directly toward the front desk, not wandering, not hesitating. She knew where the front desk was. That should have been the first clue. Meredith, the front desk clerk, saw her coming and performed a small, almost imperceptible adjustment. She angled her body away, turned her attention to the computer screen with sudden, intense focus, and began typing something that didn't need to be typed. It was a reflex, trained into her over 3 years of hospitality work. If you don't acknowledge the problem doesn't exist. The woman stopped at the desk. She placed both hands on the marble counter. Her fingers were raw, the nails broken. There was a bruise encircling her right wrist like a bracelet. She stood there. She didn't speak. Meredith continued typing. The silence between them expanded, filling the space like water rising in a glass. 10 seconds. 20. The woman still didn't speak. She just stood. Waiting. It was the waiting that made it uncomfortable. A person who was confused would look around, fidget, ask a question. A person who was desperate would plead. But this woman did neither. She stood at that counter with the patience of someone who understood exactly how this place worked. Who knew that the staff would try to ignore her. Who knew they were hoping she'd leave on her own so they wouldn't have to make it a thing. She wasn't going to leave. A couple at a nearby table, the kind of couple that existed in this hotel, like set dressing, ornamental and expensive, exchanged a glance. The woman, late 50s, with a diamond tennis bracelet and a blow-dry that cost more than Marin's last paycheck, whispered something behind her hand. The man shook his head and returned to his phone. Neither of them looked at Marin's face. Neither of them noticed the bruising, the cut, the split lip. They saw the sweatshirt. They saw the dirty hair. And that was enough. The story wrote itself in their minds. Homeless, addict, lust, case closed. This was how the Belhavet worked, not with locks and gates, with assumptions. The building sorted people the moment they crossed the threshold, the way an immune system identifies foreign bodies. If you belonged, the air embraced you. If you didn't, it pushed you out, silently, politely, with a smile and a redirect to the nearest shelter. The violence was in the civility. Marin knew this. She had been part of the system once. She had watched it work from the inside, had watched the seamless, smiling way undesirable guests were guided toward the exit, the way complaints from certain guests were addressed within minutes, while others disappeared into bureaucratic silence. She had watched it, participated in it, and never questioned it. Until the system turned on her. Meredith finally looked up, manufactured a thin smile that didn't reach her eyes, and said, "Can I help you?" The woman's voice was hoarse, quiet, not weak, depleted, like she'd used it too much, or not at all for days. "I need to speak with someone in management." Meredith blinked. "I'm sorry?" "Management. I need to speak with someone in charge." The request was delivered without inflection, without emotion, but there was something under it, a bedrock of certainty that didn't match the torn sweatshirt and the battered face. Meredith glanced toward Cordell, a quick, practiced look that said, "This one's yours." Cordell set down his tablet. He adjusted his tie, a deep burgundy today, and walked toward the front desk with measured steps. He positioned himself 2 feet to the left of Meredith, not behind the counter but beside it, establishing himself as a gatekeeper rather than a servant. "Good afternoon," Cordell said. His voice was warm, smooth, calibrated to the exact temperature of professional concern. "I'm the floor manager. How can I assist you?" The woman looked at him. Her eyes, and this was the thing people kept failing to register, were clear, not glassy, not unfocused, not dilated. They were dark brown, steady, and entirely lucid. Whatever had happened to this woman, she was not confused. She was not high. She was not lost. "I need to access the 4th floor," she said. Cordell's smile didn't change, but something behind it did, a small recalibration. "The 4th floor is reserved for registered guests. Are you a guest with us?" "No." "I see." Cordell clasped his hands in front of him. "Unfortunately, our guest floors are private. I'd be happy to help you with anything in our lobby or direct you to—" "I'm not looking for directions," the woman said. A beat of silence. "Ma'am," Cordell said, and the shift was there now, the warmth draining out of his voice like heat from a room when the door opens. "This is a private establishment. If you're not a registered guest, I'm afraid I can't grant access to restricted areas. If there's someone you're trying to reach, I can attempt to contact them on your behalf. There's no one to contact. I need to get to room 418. The specificity of the room number changed things. It wasn't a vague plea. It wasn't a confused request. She knew the exact room. Cordell tilted his head. And why would you need to access room 418? Because I left something there. Left something. Cordell repeated the words as if tasting them. Ma'am, are you saying you were previously a guest? I wasn't a guest. The lobby had gotten quieter. Conversations at nearby tables had thinned. A couple near the atrium bar, a man in a navy blazer and a woman with a silk scarf tied at her throat, were watching openly now, the way people watch a car accident, with horror and appetite. Cordell's patience was a finite resource, and it was running out. He leaned slightly forward, lowering his voice, but the acoustics of the marble lobby carried every word. Ma'am, I'm going to be direct with you. You've entered a property where appearance and decorum are part of the experience we provide to our guests. I can see that you're in some distress. I'd like to help you find the appropriate resources. There are several shelters within. I don't need a shelter. Within walking distance. And I can have our doorman call you a... I worked here. The words dropped between them like a stone into still water. Cordell stopped. For the first time, his composure cracked. Just barely. Just a hairline fracture across the surface of his polished expression. He recovered in less than a second, but the damage was done. Something had shifted. I'm sorry. I worked here, the woman repeated. Housekeeping, 4th floor. My name is Marin Calloway. The name didn't register on Cordell's face. Or if it did, he was too skilled to show it. I don't have any record of a Marin Calloway on our current staff, he said carefully. I didn't say current. Behind them, something else was happening. Something no one noticed, because they were too busy watching the spectacle at the front desk. A man sitting alone in the far corner of the lobby lounge set down his espresso. He had been there for nearly an hour. He sat in a leather wingback chair angled toward the window, positioned so that the afternoon light fell behind him, keeping his face in soft shadow. He was perhaps 45, though the kind of 45 that could be 38 or 52 depending on the light. Dark hair cut short, peppered at the temples. A face that was handsome in a stark, geometric way, prominent cheekbones, a straight nose, a jaw that looked like it had been set wrong once and healed harder. He wore a dark suit, no tie, the top button of his black shirt open, no watch, no rings, nothing that drew the eye, except the quality of the tailoring, which was so precise it was almost invisible. He had been reading something on his phone when the woman entered. He had looked up, the way everyone did, at the disturbance, but unlike everyone else, he hadn't looked away. His name was Cassian Motola, and the name meant nothing to anyone in this lobby, which was precisely how he preferred it. Cassian watched the woman the way a doctor watches a patient, clinically, attentively, cataloging details that others filtered out. He noted the swelling on her face. He noted the way she held her left arm slightly closer to her body, protecting her rib cage. He noted the bruise on her wrist and the way she flinched, almost imperceptibly, when Cordell leaned toward her, not away from the words, away from the proximity of a man's body. He noted that her hands, despite everything, were steady, and he noted that she had walked to the front desk without looking at the signs, without pausing to orient herself. She had walked in a straight line, the way a person walks through their own home. Cassian set his espresso on the side table. He didn't stand up, not yet. He listened. Back at the front desk, Cordell had regrouped. Miss Calloway, he said, pronouncing the name as though handling something mildly unpleasant. Even if you were previously employed here, that wouldn't grant you access to guest rooms. I'm sure you understand. I understand more than you think. I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Not until I get what I came for. Cordell exhaled through his nose. He pressed 2 fingers against his earpiece, the discreet communication device all floor managers wore, and spoke quietly. Vaughn, I need you at the front. Lobby situation. Within 30 seconds, a security officer appeared from the corridor near the business center. Vaughn Dillinger was built like a defensive lineman, 6'3", 240, with a shaved head and the kind of impassive expression that came from years of standing between trouble and expensive things. He wore the hotel's security uniform, dark suit, earpiece, no visible weapon. "Ma'am," Vaughn said, positioning himself at Cordell's right shoulder. Not aggressive, not yet, just present. "I'm going to need you to come with me." Marin didn't move. "Ma'am, let's step outside. We can sort this out." "There's nothing to sort out," Marin said. "I need to get to room 418. That's all." A guest at the nearest table, a woman in her 60s with reading glasses perched on her nose and a Hermes scarf draped over her shoulders, leaned toward her companion and said, loud enough to carry, "They should have removed her 5 minutes ago. This is appalling." Another guest, a younger man in a fitted vest and expensive sneakers, had his phone out, not calling anyone. Recording, Marin saw the phone. Something flickered across her face. Not embarrassment, not anger, recognition. She had been filmed before. She knew what it meant. She knew that in 30 seconds, she would be a clip, a spectacle, the crazy woman at the Belle Havette. And she knew that nobody watching the clip would ask the right question. Nobody would ask what had happened to her. "Ma'am," Vaughn said again, his voice dropping. "Last time I'm going to ask." Cordell had already turned away, dismissing the situation as handled. He was reaching for his tablet when Marin spoke again. "I know about the 14th, she said. Cordell's hand stopped mid-reach. He turned back slowly. "Excuse me?" "The 14th, Marin repeated. "October 14th, room 418, I know what happened." The lobby sounds, the ambient music, the murmur of conversation, the clink of glasses, all of it continued. The world didn't stop. But something in Cordell Haight's face did. Just for a moment. A flash of something quick and cold behind his eyes. Not confusion, but calculation. The look of a man who has just heard a sound in a dark house and is deciding whether to investigate or lock the door. He recovered. Of course he recovered. He always did. "I don't know what you're referring to," Cordell said. "Vaughn, please escort Ms. Calloway to the street." "Don't touch me," Marin said. She didn't shout it. She said it the way you say something you've had to say too many times. Flat, practiced, final. Vaughn hesitated. He was trained to de-escalate. He looked at Cordell. Cordell's jaw tightened. "Remove her." Vaughn reached for Marin's arm. She pulled back sharply, violently, and in the motion her oversized sweatshirt shifted. And for just a second, the collar pulled to the side, revealing the base of her neck and her collarbone. There were marks there, not bruises, something worse, ligature marks, thin, precise lines pressed into the skin, the kind of marks left by something narrow and deliberate, zip ties, cord, something that had been tightened around her wrists and neck by someone who knew how tight was tight enough. Vaughn saw them. His hand dropped. He took a half step back. He had been a military police officer before this job. He had seen marks like those on the women they pulled out of shipping containers in Norfolk. "Sir," Vaughn said quietly to Cordell. "Maybe we should escort her out," Cordell repeated. His voice was steel now. "That's an order." "No." The word came from across the lobby. It wasn't loud. It was barely above conversational volume. But it carried the way a gunshot carries. Sudden, absolute, cutting through everything else. Everyone turned. Cassian Mottola was standing. He had risen from the wingback chair with the unhurried precision of a man who never stands up, unless he means something by it. His hands were at his sides. His face was expressionless. He walked toward the front desk. His shoes made no sound on the marble. He moved through the lobby the way weather moves, quietly, until it's overhead. Cordell frowned. "Sir, this is a staff matter. If you could please return to—" "She said don't touch her," Cassian said. His voice was medium register, unhurried, with a faint accent that could have been from anywhere Mediterranean, southern Italy, maybe, or the coast of something older. It was the kind of voice that didn't need volume because it had weight. Cordell assessed him quickly. The suit, the posture, the confidence. Guest, money, important, handle with care. Sir, I apologize for the disturbance. We're resolving this as quickly as— You're not resolving anything, Cassian said. He stopped next to Marin, not between her and the security guard, but beside her, close enough to be a statement, far enough to not crowd her. He didn't look at her. He looked at Cordell. What room did she ask for? Cordell hesitated. Sir, with respect, this doesn't concern— 418. She asked for 418. Cassian turned to Meredith, who was frozen behind the desk like a rabbit in an open field. Is 418 occupied? Meredith looked at Cordell. Cordell gave a barely perceptible shake of his head. Ma'am, Cassian said to Meredith. I didn't ask him. I asked you. Is room 418 occupied? Meredith swallowed. Her fingers moved over the keyboard. It's— No, sir. It's currently vacant. Blocked from service. Blocked from service, Cassian repeated. Meaning what? It's flagged for maintenance. It hasn't been assigned to guests in— She checked the screen. In 3 weeks. 3 weeks. Cassian said it to no one in particular, but the way he said it made the number feel significant. Marin was looking at him now. She hadn't asked for his help. She hadn't expected it, and she didn't trust it. That was visible in the rigid set of her shoulders, the way her weight had shifted onto the balls of her feet, ready to move. She was a woman who had recently learned that help from strangers usually came with a price tag. But she didn't tell him to stop. Sir, Cordell said, and now there was an edge, a blade, wrapped in silk. I appreciate your concern, but this woman is trespassing. She is not a guest, she is not staff, and she is causing a disruption. Our security team— Your security team, Cassian said, just saw ligature marks on this woman's neck and was about to drag her into the street. He paused. Is that the experience the Belhavet provides? The words landed like a slap. Cordell's face went still. The guests within earshot went quiet. The man with the phone lowered it slightly. Cassian turned to Marin for the first time. He looked at her face, the bruising, the cut, the split lip. And his expression didn't change. He didn't wince. He didn't perform sympathy. He just looked. You worked here, he said. Not a question. Yes. When? Until 3 weeks ago. What happened 3 weeks ago? Marin's jaw tightened. She looked at Cordell, then back at Cassian. That's what I'm trying to find out. Cassian studied her for another moment. Then he turned back to the front desk, reached into his jacket, and produced a black card. He placed it on the marble counter in front of Meredith. Book room 418, he said. Under my name. Cordell stepped forward. Sir, I told you that room is blocked. Unblock it. I can't simply— Unblock it or I'll call Roman Kessler. Cassian said the name the way you lay down a winning card. He manages this property for Ashcroft Hospitality Group, correct? I believe he's in New York today. I can have him on the phone in about 90 seconds. Do you want me to explain to him why his floor manager is refusing service and manhandling a visibly injured woman in front of guests who are filming it? He nodded toward the young man with the phone, who suddenly looked like he wished he were somewhere else. Cordell's face went through a series of rapid calculations, cost-benefit analysis performed at the speed of self-preservation. He looked at the black card on the counter. He looked at Cassian. He looked at the phone camera. Meredith, Cordell said tightly, unblock 418. Meredith's fingers shook as she typed. The elevator was glass-walled on one side, offering a rising view of the atrium as it climbed. Marin stood in the far corner, her back to the glass, watching the numbers ascend. She hadn't spoken since the lobby. Cassian stood opposite her, hands in his pockets, giving her the full width of the elevator between them. He didn't try to fill the silence. He understood, in a way that most people didn't, that silence was where the truth lived. The elevator smelled like cedar and cold air. Marin's hands were trembling. She pressed them flat against her thighs to still them. But the tremor moved up her arms and into her shoulders. It wasn't cold. It wasn't adrenaline. Not entirely. It was the body's delayed response to proximity, to being inside this building again, inside these walls that she had walked through every day for 2 years, pushing a cart loaded with fresh linens and miniature bottles of French shampoo, smiling at guests who never looked at her face. She had known the sound of every elevator in this hotel. This one hummed at a slightly higher pitch than the service elevator, which rattled and groaned and always smelled faintly of cleaning solution and overcooked salmon from the kitchen below. She had known which hallways had cameras and which didn't. She had known that the ice machine on the 4th floor was louder than the others, and that housekeeping stored the backup linens in 412, because the closet door on the east wing jammed every summer when the humidity swelled the wood. She had known this hotel the way a body knows its own skeleton, from the inside, structurally, invisibly, and she had known that something was wrong long before she found proof. It started with small things. Rooms that were supposed to be vacant, but showed signs of use. A crumpled towel in the bathroom, a depression in the bed, the faint scent of perfume that didn't match the hotel's signature fragrance. Rooms that were blocked from the booking system for maintenance, but never received a work order. She had mentioned it to her supervisor once, casually, the way you mention a leaky faucet, just an observation, barely a concern. Her supervisor, a tired woman named Glynis, who had been cleaning rooms for 19 years and had long since stopped asking questions, had looked at her with flat eyes and said, "Some rooms are handled differently. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it." In hospitality, that phrase was a padlock. It meant, this is above your pay grade. This is not your business. This is the kind of curiosity that gets you transferred to the night shift, or scheduled for the worst rooms, or simply not scheduled at all, your hours dwindling week by week, until you took the hint and quit. Marin had taken the hint, for a while. But the rooms kept bothering her. She noticed patterns. Certain rooms on the 4th floor, 418, 416, 420, were consistently blocked during specific weeks. She noticed that Cordell Haight personally handled the key cards for those rooms. She noticed that on the mornings after those rooms were in use, the housekeeping assignments were rearranged so that only Glynis or Cordell himself handled them. Never the regular rotation, never Marin, until the day Glynis called in sick and the system assigned room 418 to Marin by default. That was the day she found the first camera. That was the day everything changed. The elevator opened on the 4th floor. The hallway stretched out in both directions, dim and silent, carpeted in deep charcoal with brass sconce lighting that cast warm circles on the walls. It smelled exactly the same. Lemongrass. That was the 4th floor's signature scent, piped through the ventilation system. Each floor had its own. The 6th was eucalyptus. The penthouse was something smoky and unnamed. Marin stepped out. She turned left without thinking. Cassian followed, but slowly. He let her lead. He watched her move through the corridor with the unconscious certainty of muscle memory. She didn't check room numbers. She navigated by feel, by the invisible geography that only people who had worked a space day after day possessed. She stopped in front of room 418. The door was closed. A small placard hung from the handle. Out of service. Maintenance. Marin stared at the sign. Something moved behind her eyes, not tears, but something harder, compressed fury. "They blocked it," she said quietly. Cassian said nothing. He extended the keycard Meredith had programmed downstairs. Marin took it. Her fingers brushed his palm, and she pulled away quickly, not from revulsion but from reflex, the reflexes of a woman whose body had been recently taught that contact meant pain. She swiped the card. The lock clicked green. She pushed the door open. Room 418 was dark. The blackout curtains were drawn. The air inside was stale. Not the recycled freshness of a regularly serviced room, but the flat, dead air of a space that had been sealed. Marin reached for the light switch. She knew exactly where it was without looking. 6 inches inside the door, 4 feet from the floor, left side. The overhead lights came on. The room was clean. Meticulously, aggressively clean. The bed was made with military precision. The surfaces gleamed. There was no trace of dust, no indication that anything had ever happened here. But Marin knew better. She stood in the doorway and took a breath. The room rushed at her, not as it was now, blank and sanitized, but as it had been. The room as she had found it 3 weeks ago, when she had pushed open this same door with her master key card, expecting the usual turnover, strip the beds, scrub the bathroom, Replace the towels, check the minibar. She hadn't expected to find the camera. It was small, impossibly small, the kind of thing you could buy online for less than $100. The kind that hid inside a smoke detector, or a clock radio, or the tiny gap between a mirror and a wall. She had found it by accident, or by instinct, or by the particular alertness that comes from spending your life in spaces where you are not seen and therefore have learned to see everything. She had been wiping down the mirror above the desk when she noticed the angle was wrong. The mirror had been moved, fractionally, half an inch, and in the gap between the mirror and the wall something glinted. She had pulled the mirror forward and found it. A lens the size of a pencil eraser, wired to a transmitter no bigger than a matchbox, taped to the back of the frame. She had stared at it for a long time, and then she had made the worst decision of her life. She had reported it. Maren walked into the room now, past the bed, past the desk, straight to the bathroom. She dropped to her knees on the tile floor and reached behind the toilet, running her fingers along the underside of the porcelain tank. Nothing. She reached further, pressing her cheek to the tile, stretching her arm into the narrow gap between the tank and the wall. Her fingers found it, tape, the edge of a small, hard rectangle. She pulled. The tape resisted, then gave. A USB drive came free in her hand, black, unmarked, no bigger than her thumb. She closed her fist around it and exhaled. The breath came out ragged, shaking, the sound of a woman who had been holding something in for 21 days. She leaned her forehead against the cool porcelain of the toilet tank and allowed herself 5 seconds. 5 seconds of not being strong. 5 seconds of remembering the night she had hidden the drive here, crouched on this same tile floor, hands shaking, heart slamming, knowing she was about to hand her phone to a man she instinctively didn't trust, knowing she needed insurance, knowing she had maybe 60 seconds before Prescott expected her back in his office. She had pulled the USB drive from her pocket. She always carried one, a habit from college, backing up essays and photos, and she had taped it to the cold pipe behind the toilet with a strip of medical tape from the first aid kit under the sink. 30 seconds. Door closed. Back to Prescott's office. Phone handed over with a smile that she hoped looked trusting. It had been the smartest thing she'd ever done, and it had taken less time than brushing her teeth. 5 seconds ended. She straightened up. "Is that what you came for?" Cassian asked from the doorway. He hadn't entered the room. He was leaning against the frame, arms crossed, watching her with that same clinical attention. "Yes." "What's on it?" Maren stood up. She steadied herself against the sink. She looked at him in the mirror, his reflection framed in the doorway behind her, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. "Proof," she said. Downstairs, Cordell Haight was in his office. The office was behind the concierge wing, through a door, but guests never noticed because it was designed to be invisible. Same color as the wall, no signage, the handle flush with the surface. Inside it was small, but immaculate. A glass desk, a single orchid, a wall of monitors showing live feeds from the hotel security cameras. Cordell was on the phone. "She's here," he said. His voice was low, controlled, but there was a vibration underneath it, the frequency of fear. "She came in through the front. I tried to remove her. There was a guest involved. He interfered, insisted on giving her access. She's on 4 right now." He listened. "I don't know what she has. I don't know what she found. I thought you said it was taken care of." He listened again, longer this time. No, I'm not going to do that. This is your problem, not mine. I did what you asked. I deleted her file. I wiped the schedule. When she disappeared, I told HR she abandoned her position. I've done my part." A pause. "She has marks on her, Marcus. She looks like she was..." He stopped, swallowed. "What did you people do to her?" The voice on the other end said something that made Cordell close his eyes. "I'm not going to prison for this," Cordell whispered. "Do you understand me? I am not going to prison." He hung up. He stared at the monitors. Camera 4 showed the 4th floor hallway. The corridor was empty. But room 418 was not. In room 418, Maren sat on the edge of the bed. The USB drive was in her closed fist, resting on her knee. She hadn't cried. She wasn't going to. Cassian remained in the doorway. He had not entered the room, not sat down, not made any gesture toward comfort. He simply stood and waited, the way a person waits at a bedside, present without demanding. "You don't have to tell me anything," he said. Maren looked at him. "Then why are you here?" It was a fair question. She asked it without hostility, with genuine curiosity, the kind that comes from having recently experienced a world where no one does anything without wanting something. Cassian considered the question. He didn't rush. "2 months ago," he said, "my niece stayed in this hotel. She was here for a legal conference. 3 nights. When she came home, she was different." Maren's expression changed, subtly. A tightening around her eyes, a shift in the way she held her breath. "Different how?" she asked, though her voice suggested she already knew. "Quiet, wouldn't eat, stopped returning calls. She cut her hair. She had long hair, she loved her hair. She cut it all off in the middle of the night." He paused. "She won't tell me what happened. She won't tell anyone." The room was silent except for the ventilation system, pushing stale air through the vents. "What's her name?" Maren asked. "Renata." Maren closed her eyes. When she opened them, they were harder than before, not colder, sharper, the eyes of someone assembling pieces of a picture she had hoped was smaller than it was. "What floor was she on?" "4th. "What room?" "I don't know. She didn't tell me. She doesn't know I'm here." He paused. "I came to see the place, to understand. I wasn't planning to do anything today. I was just looking." "Looking for what?" "For whatever made her stop being herself." Maren stared at him for a long time. She was deciding something, weighing the USB drive in her hand against the unknown quantity of this man standing in the doorway. She had trusted the wrong person 3 weeks ago, and it had nearly killed her. Trust was not something she could afford, but she was also alone. Completely, utterly alone. The police were not an option, she knew that now. The shelters couldn't protect her. Her family was 400 miles away, and the people who had taken her had made it clear what would happen if she talked. She had come back to this hotel because the USB drive was the only leverage she had. But leverage is useless if you have no one to use it against. "There were cameras," Maren said, "in Bartolini, the rooms." Cassian didn't react. Not visibly, but something changed in the quality of his stillness. The way air changes before a storm when the pressure drops and the birds go quiet. "Not security cameras," Maren continued. "Hidden cameras, behind mirrors, inside smoke detectors, in the bathroom vents. I found the first one in this room. Then I checked 3 other rooms on this floor. All of them had the same thing." "How long?" "I don't know, months, maybe longer. The wiring was settled in, it wasn't a rush job." "You reported it?" "To the general manager, Leland Prescott." She said the name the way you say the name of a disease. "I went to his office. I showed him the photos I'd taken on my phone. I told him I'd found recording devices in guest rooms and that we needed to call the police." "And?" "He thanked me. He said I had done the right thing. He said he would handle it personally and that I should keep it quiet for the investigation." She paused. "He asked me to hand over my phone." "You gave it to him?" "I gave it to him." A bitter half-smile crossed her face. "I was employee of the month once. I believed in the system. I believed that if you did the right thing would happen back." Cassian said nothing. He understood the particular cruelty of that faith. "The next day, my keycard stopped working. The day after that, I was called into HR. They said my position had been eliminated. Budget cuts, restructuring. They gave me a check for 2 weeks severance and a non-disclosure agreement to sign." "Did you sign it?" "No." "Good." "That night, someone broke into my apartment." She said it simply. The way you describe weather, but her hand tightened on the USB drive, and the tendons in her neck stood out like cables. "They didn't take anything, they just let me know they'd been there. Moved things, left the door open. The next day, my car had a flat. The day after that, someone followed me to the grocery store. I could see them in the parking lot, just sitting in a black SUV, watching. Escalation. I went to the police, filed a report about the break-in. The officer took notes, said they'd increase patrols. Nothing happened. A week later, I was walking home from my second job. I'd started waitressing at night to cover rent, and someone grabbed me. She stopped. Her breathing had changed, shorter, shallower. She was edging close to something that her body was trying to protect her from revisiting. "You don't have to," Cassian began. "They put me in a van," Marin said. "Two men. They drove for a long time. I was blindfolded, so I don't know where they took me. A house, somewhere rural. It smelled like mildew and gasoline." She held up her wrists, the ligature marks. "They wanted to know what I'd seen, who I'd told, whether I'd made copies. I told them I'd given everything to Prescott. They didn't believe me. Or maybe they did, and it didn't matter. They kept me for..." She paused, counting. 11 days. The number sat in the room like a body. "How did you get out?" Cassian asked. His voice was unchanged, steady, quiet, but his hands, still at his sides, had curled into fists so tight the knuckles were white. "One of them left a window unlocked. I don't know if it was carelessness or if he wanted me to leave. I went through it at 4 in the morning. I ran through woods for I don't know how long, found a road. A truck driver picked me up." She looked down at her borrowed shoes. "He gave me these." Silence. "Why come back here?" Cassian asked. "Why not run?" Marin held up the USB drive. "Because before I gave Prescott my phone, I copied the photos to this. And I hid it here, in this room, behind the toilet tank. I didn't know I was going to need it. I had a feeling. The way Prescott looked at my phone when I handed it to him, he looked relieved, not concerned, relieved." She stood up. "I came back because this is the only proof that those cameras existed. Without it, I'm just a fired housekeeper with a story. With it, you have evidence of a crime. Multiple crimes." Cassian looked at the USB drive in her hand. Then he looked at her face. The bruises, the cut, the absolute exhaustion. "You're not going to the local police," he said. Not a question. "The officer who took my break-in report, I saw him 3 days later at the hotel, in the lobby, having coffee with Prescott. They were laughing." Cassian nodded slowly. "Then we go above them." "We?" He met her eyes. "I told you. My niece was in this hotel. She was on this floor. Whatever those cameras recorded, there's a chance she's on it." The implications settled between them, heavy, ugly, real. "I didn't come here to help you," Cassian said. "I came here because someone hurt a person I love, and I don't have the full picture yet. You have a piece of it, I want to see it. And if I give it to you, what then? Then I do what I do, which is what?" Cassian looked at her with an expression that was neither kind nor cruel. It was honest, the honesty of a man who had long ago stopped pretending to be something he wasn't. "I make problems go away," he said. "That's my profession. People come to me when the legal system fails them, when the police are compromised, when the powerful have insulated themselves so completely that no ordinary tool can touch them." He paused. "I'm not a good man, Miss Calloway, but I am an effective one. And right now, the people who hurt you and the people who hurt my niece are the same people, which means we have the same problem." Marin searched his face for the lie. She had become an expert in lies over the past 3 weeks. The lie of safety, the lie of authority, the lie of someone who says they'll handle it. She didn't find one. That scared her more than anything. "I need a computer," she said. "I need to see what's on this drive before I give it to anyone." Cassian pulled out his phone. "I'll have a laptop brought up. Clean, no network connection if you prefer." "I prefer." He made the call. Short, 3 sentences, no names. They waited. Marin sat on the edge of the bed. Cassian leaned against the wall near the door, arms crossed, eyes on the hallway. Neither of them spoke. But the silence between them had changed. It was no longer the silence of strangers. It was the silence of 2 people standing on the same side of a line they hadn't known existed until today. 7 minutes later, there was a knock at the door. Cassian opened it. A young man in a dark coat, no hotel uniform, no identification, handed him a slim silver laptop and left without a word. Cassian set the laptop on the desk and stepped back. Marin plugged in the USB drive. The screen glowed to life. The drive contained 47 photographs and 3 video files. The photographs were what Marin had described: hidden cameras in guest rooms, close-ups showing the devices concealed, behind mirrors, inside smoke detectors, tucked into bathroom ventilation grills. The images were clinical, documentary, taken by someone who understood that evidence needed to be clear, well-lit, and unambiguous. But the 3 video files were different. They were not footage from the hidden cameras. They were recordings from Marin's phone, shakily filmed, low resolution, shot in haste. In the first video, Marin's hand appeared pulling a camera from behind a mirror. In the second, she documented a second camera inside the smoke detector, showing how the device's casing had been modified to conceal the lens. In the third, she panned across the underside of a bathroom vanity where a wireless transmitter had been taped, its small green light blinking steadily. Marin watched the videos with the detached expression of someone revisiting a crime scene. When they finished, she minimized the media player and opened the drive's file directory. She froze. "What?" Cassian asked. "There's a folder here I didn't create." She clicked it open. Inside were 6 additional files, video files, large ones, each over a gigabyte. They were labeled with dates and room numbers: 418_OCT8, 418_OCT11, 416_OCT12, 416_OCT14, 420_SEP29, 420_OCT3. "These aren't mine," Marin whispered. "I didn't put these here." She opened the first one. Cassian stepped closer. The footage was from one of the hidden cameras. The angle was high, looking down from somewhere near the ceiling. Room 418. The image was clear, despite the hidden placement. A king bed, the desk, the window. A woman entered the frame. She was alone, a guest removing her earrings after what appeared to be a long day. Marin stopped the video. Her face was ashen. "Someone copied their own files onto your drive," Cassian said quietly. "No," Marin said. "Someone put these files here for me to find after I hid the drive and before I was taken." The implication was staggering. Somewhere inside this hotel, someone else knew about the cameras, someone who had access to the recordings, someone who had found Marin's hidden USB drive and, instead of taking it, had added to it. Someone who wanted these recordings found. "Play the one from October 14th, Cassian said. Marin looked at him. "You told the manager downstairs that you knew about October 14th. That's what stopped him cold." Marin shook her head. "I said that because it's the day before I was fired. I was fishing. I didn't know there was actually footage." She clicked the file. 416_OCT14. The video showed room 416. The angle was similar, high corner, looking down at the bed. The room was empty at first. Then the door opened and 2 people entered. The first was a man, middle-aged, heavy-set, wearing a suit. His face was clearly visible. Neither Marin nor Cassian recognized him. The second person was a woman, young, very young, maybe barely 20. She was not a willing participant. That was clear within the first few seconds. The way she held her arms across her chest, the way she looked at the door, the way the man placed himself between her and the exit. Marin stopped the video. "I can't watch this," she said. "You don't have to." She ejected the USB drive. She held it in her palm and stared at it as if it were a live grenade. "This isn't just surveillance," she said. "This is trafficking. This is..." She looked at Cassian. "This is happening in this hotel, right now, with management's knowledge." Cassian's face had not changed, but something in the room had. A charge in the air, like the moment before lightning. You don't see it yet, but your body knows. "Prescott," he said. "At minimum, maybe others. Cordell, the floor manager, he deleted my employment file. He knew I'd been fired. He might know why." Cassian straightened from the wall. He buttoned his jacket. A small gesture, but definitive. The gesture of a man transitioning from observer to operator. "Ms. Calloway," he said, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Ask. If I take this to the people who can actually do something about it, not the police, not the city, but the people above them, what do you want to happen?" "I want it to stop." "That's not what I asked. I asked what you want to happen to Prescott, to the people who took you, to the man in that video. Marin looked at him for a long moment. I want them to be afraid, she said. The way I was afraid. In that house in the dark for 11 days. I want them to understand what it feels like to know that no one is coming to help. Cassian nodded. Stay here, he said. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone who isn't me. Where are you going? Downstairs. I have a conversation to finish. He left. The door clicked shut behind him. Marin locked it. She sat back on the bed, clutching the USB drive against her chest, and listened to his footsteps disappear down the hallway. For the first time in 21 days, she felt something that wasn't fear. She wasn't sure what to call it yet, but it felt like the ground under her feet. The elevator descended in silence. Cassian stood with his back against the glass wall, watching the atrium rise around him as the floors dropped away, the geometric skylight shrinking above, the lobby expanding below like the floor of a canyon. He could see the tiny figures of guests moving through the space, unaware of what was happening 4 floors above them, unaware of what had been happening in this building for months, perhaps years, while they slept and ate and left reviews about the thread count of the sheets. He made 2 phone calls before the elevator reached the ground floor. The first was to a man named Aurelio. The conversation lasted 12 seconds. Cassian said a name, Leland Prescott, and an address, the Belhavet Hotel, Richmond, Virginia. He said, I need everything. Tonight. He hung up. The second call was to a woman. Her name was Tova. She was a former federal prosecutor who now worked exclusively for people like Cassian, doing the kind of legal work that existed in the spaces between what was lawful and what was just. The conversation lasted 30 seconds. Cassian told her there was digital evidence of a sex trafficking operation run through a luxury hotel, that the local police were compromised, and that the evidence had been obtained by a former employee who had been kidnapped and held for 11 days. Tova said one word. Where? Richmond. The Belhavet. I'll have FBI field office on standby within the hour. Don't touch anything else. And Cassian, don't do anything stupid before they get here. I never do anything stupid, Cassian said. You do everything stupid. You just do it well. He hung up as the elevator doors opened. The lobby had changed in the 20 minutes he'd been upstairs. The energy was different, charged, uncertain. Word of the confrontation at the front desk had spread. Through the staff the way fire spreads through dry grass. Bellhops huddled in pairs near the luggage racks, whispering. A waitress from the lobby bar kept glancing toward the concierge wing where Cordell's office door was closed. Cassian walked straight to that door. He didn't knock. He turned the handle. It was locked, and stood there for a moment perfectly still. Then he knocked. Once. The sound was quiet, but carried an authority that a battering ram would have envied. Nothing. Mr. Haight, Cassian said through the door. You can open this, or I can have it opened. The second option involves more people and more noise, and given what I now know about this hotel, I don't think noise is in your interest. 3 seconds passed. The lock clicked. The door opened. Cordell stood inside his immaculate office, and he looked like a man who had been dismantled from the inside. His tie was loosened, the first time in perhaps a decade that his appearance had shown a crack. His face was pale, slicked with a thin sheen of sweat. His eyes were the eyes of an animal that has heard the trap spring shut, but hasn't yet felt the teeth. Close the door, Cassian said, stepping inside. Cordell closed it. He retreated behind his glass desk, positioning it between them like a barricade. I don't know who you are, Cordell said. His voice was attempting steadiness and failing. But whatever that woman told you, sit down. Cordell sat, not because he wanted to, but because his legs made the decision for him. Cassian remained standing. He didn't pace. He didn't loom. He simply stood in the center of the small office, taking up no more space than necessary, and yet somehow filling the room entirely. I'm going to ask you questions, Cassian said. You're going to answer them. If you lie to me, I will know, and this conversation will become much less pleasant for you. If you tell the truth, There is a very small chance that when this is over, you will walk away with your freedom, not your job. That's already gone, but your freedom. Cordell's hands were flat on the desk. They were shaking. Not if you understand. Cordell nodded. How long have you known about the cameras in the guest rooms? A pause. Cordell's mouth opened, then closed. He was calculating, even now, backed into a corner. His instinct was to manage, to control the narrative, to find the angle that served him best. Don't, Cassian said softly. Don't think about what answer helps you. Think about what answer is true. Cordell swallowed. Since last spring, March, maybe April. Who installed them? I don't know exactly. Prescott arranged it. He brought in outside people. I wasn't involved in the installation. But you knew. I knew there were cameras in certain rooms. Prescott said it was for security, enhanced monitoring of high-value suites. He said it was an insurance measure. And you believed that? Cordell said nothing. You didn't believe it. Cordell's voice broke. He pressed his fist against his mouth, steadying himself. I didn't want to know. I saw things. Guests that didn't look right. Young women who came in with certain men and didn't look like they wanted to be there, but I didn't. I didn't ask. I didn't look. You looked away. Yes. Cassian let the word hang. He understood men like Cordell. He had dealt with them his entire career. Men who were not evil in the way that Prescott was evil, not active participants in the machinery of harm, but something almost worse. Bystanders with keys. Men who held doors open and closed their eyes. Men who filed paperwork and didn't read it. Men who heard screaming and turned up the music. They were the infrastructure of every crime. Without them, the Prescotts of the world couldn't function. The cameras couldn't be installed. The rooms couldn't be blocked. The files couldn't be deleted. Evil needed administrative support, and men like Cordell provided it, not out of malice, but out of the most ordinary, devastating cowardice. The fear of losing a salary, a title, a seat at a table that served food they couldn't afford anywhere else. When Marin Calloway reported the cameras, what did you do? Prescott came to me. He said the situation was handled, that the girl had been let go. He told me to delete her personnel file from the system and remove her from the scheduling records. Make it like she was never here. And you did. He's my boss. You don't understand how things work here. Prescott doesn't answer to me. He answers to people I've never met. People with money, real money, the kind that makes problems disappear. Like kidnapping a 28-year-old woman and holding her in a basement for 11 days. Cordell flinched as if he'd been struck. I didn't know about that. I swear to God I didn't know. You knew she was fired for finding evidence of a crime. You knew her records were erased. You knew she vanished. And you didn't make a single phone call. What was I supposed to do? Cordell's voice cracked upward, desperate. Call the police? The police are in on it. Half the city council has stayed in this hotel. Prescott has connections to. I know what Prescott has connections to, Cassian said. I know better than you do. He paused. Where is Prescott now? I called him. When she showed up in the lobby, he said he'd handle it. What does handle it mean? Cordell looked at his hands. I don't know. Yes, you do. Silence. He said he'd send someone. The words fell between them like a door slamming shut. Cassian's expression didn't change, but his body did. A subtle shift, a redistribution of weight, the kind of adjustment that a person makes when they're transitioning from conversation to something else entirely. When? I don't know, soon. He sounded scared. Scared people do dangerous things, Mr. Haight. Cassian pulled out his phone. He typed a message, short, no more than 10 words, and sent it. Then he looked at Cordell. Here is what's going to happen. In approximately 45 minutes, 2 agents from the FBI's Richmond field office are going to walk through those lobby doors. They will have a warrant for the hotel's server room, Prescott's office, and every room on the 4th floor. They will also have a warrant for your computer and your phone. Cordell's face went the color of ash. Before they arrive, you have a choice. You can sit here and wait for them, and when they ask you questions, you can tell them everything you just told me, the truth, all of it. If you do that, And if a competent attorney argues that you were coerced and cooperating under duress, there is a chance, not a guarantee, but a chance, that you avoid the worst of what's coming. And the other option? The other option is that you try to run, or you try to destroy evidence, or you try to warn Prescott, in which case you become an active participant in a federal trafficking investigation rather than a cooperating witness. And I promise you, Mr. Haight. Cassian leaned forward, just slightly, just enough. I will make sure the agents know the difference. Cordell stared at him. Who are you? Cassian straightened. He buttoned his jacket again, that same quiet, definitive gesture. I'm the person whose niece stayed on the 4th floor of this hotel 2 months ago, he said, and I'm the person who's going to make sure that everyone responsible for what happened to her and to Marin Calloway and to every other woman who walked into a room in this building and had their privacy and their safety stolen from them, I'm going to make sure that every single one of those people answers for it. He turned toward the door. One more thing, Cassian said without turning back. The man Prescott is sending. What does he look like? I've never met him. Prescott just calls him Greer. Greer. Cassian filed the name. Stay in this office. Don't touch your phone. Don't touch your computer. He opened the door and walked out. The lobby was quieter now. The afternoon light had shifted. The geometric skylight cast longer, sharper shadows across the marble floor. Some of the lunchtime guests had filtered out, replaced by the early arrivals for the evening. Business travelers with rolling bags, a couple checking in for an anniversary. Cassian stood near the atrium bar, not drinking, watching the entrance. His phone was in his hand. 2 messages had come in. The first was from Aurelio. A file. Leland Prescott. The information was dense and damning. Property holdings, shell companies, financial connections to a network that the FBI had been investigating for 2 years without getting close enough to touch. Prescott was a middle manager in a much larger operation. The cameras were not unique to the Belhavet. There were at least 4 other hotels in 3 states running the same system. The second message was from Tova. Field office en route. ETA 40 minutes. They want the evidence handler on site. Do you have the source? Cassian typed, 4th floor, room 418, she has the drive. Tova. Keep her there, keep her safe. Cassian put the phone away. He looked at the revolving doors. A man had just walked in. He was medium height, medium build, wearing a gray windbreaker and khakis, the kind of outfit designed to be forgettable. He carried no luggage. He walked past the front desk without stopping, without checking in, without making eye contact with anyone. He moved with the purposeful anonymity of a man who had been in this building before and didn't need directions. He headed for the elevators. Cassian watched him. He noted the man's hands, empty, but the right one stayed close to the waistband beneath the windbreaker. He noted the man's shoes, tactical, rubber-soled, not the shoes of a guest. He noted the man's eyes as they swept the lobby. Quick, efficient, threat assessment, professional, Greer. Cassian intercepted him at the elevator bank. Can I help you? Cassian said, positioning himself between the man and the elevator call button. Greer looked at him. His face was unremarkable, the kind of face that was designed to be unremarkable. Brown hair, no distinguishing features, a face that would dissolve from memory 5 minutes after you saw it. I'm a guest, Greer said. His voice was flat, Midwestern, colorless. Which room? I don't see how that's your business. It's not. Cassian didn't move. I'm just making conversation. Greer stared at him. Something passed between them. A mutual recognition. Not of faces or names, but of kind. They were both men who operated in the spaces that polite society pretended didn't exist. They both knew what the other was. The only question was, who had more to lose? The lobby hummed around them. A family of 4 was checking in at the front desk, the children oblivious, the parents absorbed in their phones. A room service cart rattled past on its way to the elevator bank, pushed by a waiter who didn't notice the 2 men standing 6 feet apart, conducting a conversation that had nothing to do with the words being said. Cassian memorized the man's face. He noted the small scar on the right earlobe, piercing, removed. He noted the calluses on the knuckles of the man's right hand, visible when he'd reached for the elevator button. He noted the slight asymmetry in the way the windbreaker hung, heavier on the right side. Holster. "Excuse me," Greer said, reaching past Cassian for the elevator button. Cassian didn't block him. He stepped aside. But as Greer pressed the button and the elevator doors opened, Cassian spoke again. "She's not in the hotel anymore." Greer paused, one foot in the elevator. "The woman you're here for, Marin Calloway, she left 20 minutes ago through the service entrance. She has the evidence with her and she's on her way to a federal building right now." It was a lie. Marin was still in room 418, behind a locked door, clutching the USB drive. But lies, deployed correctly, were a kind of architecture. They built rooms you could trap people in. Greer turned slowly. His hand had migrated closer to his waistband. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said. "Then it won't matter that I'm telling you." Cassian met his eyes. "Go back to whoever sent you. Tell them it's over. The FBI has been contacted. The evidence is out of this building. Whatever Prescott promised you, it's not enough. Not for what's coming." Greer's face didn't change, but his hand stopped moving. He was calculating, the same kind of calculation Cordell had done, but colder, more practiced. This was a man who measured every situation in terms of risk and extraction. The question he was asking himself was simple. Is the money worth the exposure? Cassian helped him with the math. "In about 35 minutes, this lobby is going to be full of federal agents. If you're here when they arrive, your face ends up in a database. And I suspect your face is already in a few databases you'd prefer it wasn't." 10 seconds of silence. Greer stepped out of the elevator. He didn't say a word. He walked back through the lobby, through the revolving doors, and disappeared into the late afternoon. Cassian exhaled. He took out his phone and called Tova. "There was a cleaner. He's gone. Move faster." 25 minutes. Cassian rode the elevator back to the 4th floor. He knocked on the door of 418. "It's me." A pause. Then Marin's voice, muffled. "How do I know that?" "You don't. But I'm the only person who's told you the truth today." The lock clicked. The door opened. Marin stood in the doorway. She hadn't moved from her position near the bed. The USB drive was still in her hand. She looked at Cassian's face, reading it. "Something happened," she said. "Prescott sent someone. He's gone, but we need to move faster than I planned. Federal agents are on their way. Real ones, not local. A woman named Tova is coordinating. She's..." He paused, choosing his words. "She's not someone who can be bought." "And you trust her?" "With certain things, yes." Marin looked at the USB drive. "If I hand this over, I lose the only thing protecting me. If you keep it, you're a woman alone with evidence that powerful people are willing to kidnap and kill for. The protection isn't in having it. The protection is in making it public. Public, like giving it to the FBI. The FBI, in this case, is a means to an end. Once the evidence is in federal hands, killing you doesn't help them. It just adds a murder charge to the list." Marin sat on the edge of the bed. She was quiet for a long time, long enough for the light outside the window to shift, the shadows in the room lengthening. "When I worked here," she said, "I was invisible. Not metaphorically, I mean it literally. The guests didn't see me. They'd leave the room and I'd come in, and I'd clean up their mess, and they'd come back, and the room was clean, and they never once thought about the person who made it that way. I was furniture. I was part of the system." She turned the USB drive over in her fingers. "When I found the cameras, I thought, finally someone will have to see me. I'll show them what's happening, and they'll have to acknowledge that I exist, that I saw something, that I matter. But instead, they erased me even more completely than before. They deleted my file. They deleted my schedule. They took me from my apartment and locked me in a room where no one could hear me." She looked up. "They made me as invisible as I'd always been, just more literally." Cassian stood by the window, the city behind him. He didn't offer comfort. He offered something rarer. Witness. "You're not invisible now," he said. "Because of you. No, because you walked through those doors today. alone. Looking the way you look, knowing what they would do, knowing what they would say. He paused. That wasn't invisible. That was the bravest thing I've seen in a long time. Maren stared at him. Something shifted in her face. Not a softening exactly, more like a settling. The expression of a person who has been clenching their jaw for 3 weeks and finally, fractionally, lets go. Okay, she said. I'll talk to your FBI contact. But I stay in the room when they go through the building. I want to watch. Done. They came in unmarked cars. Cassian saw them from the window of room 418. 3 black sedans pulling up to the hotel's front entrance in quick succession. No sirens, no lights. The agents emerged in dark suits and windbreakers, moving with the coordinated efficiency of people who had rehearsed this kind of entry before. The lead agent was a woman named Farrow, tall, angular with cropped red hair, and the kind of face that gave nothing away. She carried a leather portfolio and walked through the Belhavet's revolving doors like she owned the building. Maren watched from the window. Her hand was on the glass, her breath fogging a small circle on the surface. That's a lot of people, she said. Tova doesn't do things halfway. Downstairs, the lobby was frozen. Guests stopped mid-conversation. Staff stood with trays balanced in numb hands. Meredith at the front desk looked like she might faint. The young man who had been filming earlier had put his phone away. Something in the air told him that whatever was happening now was no longer entertainment. A bellhop named Thorne, a 22-year-old who had worked at the Belhavet for 6 months, and who had always thought of it as the best job he'd ever had, watched the agents fan out across the lobby. He watched them station themselves at every exit, watched them speak into radios, watched the lead agent, the tall woman with the red hair, walk to the front desk like she was taking ownership of the space. He thought, something has been happening here that I didn't know about. He thought, something has been happening here that maybe I should have known about. He would think about that for a long time. Agent Farrow approached the desk, badge out. She spoke in a voice that was clear and carried without being raised. FBI, we have a warrant for this property. I need all staff to remain in their current positions. No one leaves the building until we've completed our sweep. Cordell Haight emerged from his office. He looked at the agents, at the warrant Farrow held out to him, and at the badge. Then he did the only smart thing he'd done all day. He raised his hands, palms out, and said, I'll cooperate. 2 agents escorted him to a conference room. 2 more went directly to the server room in the basement. The room where the hotel's security footage, and presumably the feeds from the hidden cameras, were stored and transmitted. 4 agents took the elevator to the 4th floor. They knocked on 418. Cassian opened the door. Agent Farrow looked at him. Something passed between them, not recognition exactly, but understanding. She knew who he was. Not his name, perhaps, but his type. The kind of man who made things happen before law enforcement arrived. The kind of man whose involvement was both useful and complicated. Mr. Mottola, she said. So she did know his name. Agent Farrow. Tova sends her regards. She also says, and I'm quoting, "Don't be there when I arrive. I'm not planning to be." Farrow turned to Maren, who was standing near the window, the USB drive visible in her clenched hand. "Ms. Calloway?" Maren nodded. "My name is Special Agent Farrow. I'm with the FBI's Human Trafficking Task Force. I understand you have evidence pertaining to criminal activity at this hotel." "Yes." "I'd like to take your statement in full. Everything that happened to you, starting from the moment you found the first camera. Can you do that?" Maren looked at Cassian. He gave her a single slight nod. She looked back at Farrow. "Yes, I can do that." Farrow sat down at the desk. She opened her portfolio, took out a recorder, and placed it between them. "Take your time," Farrow said. "Start from the beginning." Maren sat across from her. She set the USB drive on the table between them, gently, carefully, as though putting down something that had been burning her hand for weeks, and she began to speak. The sweep of the Belhavet took 4 hours. The agents found 11 cameras across 7 rooms on 3 floors. They seized the server room's hard drives, which contained over 800 hours of recordings spanning 14 months. They found financial records linking Prescott to a shell company that received payments from a network operating in 6 states. They found a guest ledger maintained separately from the hotel's official booking system that documented specific room assignments for individuals who were identified by code names rather than real names. Cordell Haight gave a full statement. He named Prescott. He named the shell company. He named 3 members of the Richmond Police Department who had been paid to ignore complaints and lose reports. He named Greer, the cleaner, though Greer was already gone, and finding him would become someone else's problem. Leland Prescott was arrested at his home at 9:47 that evening. He was in his bathrobe eating dinner. The agents found his personal laptop, which contained copies of select recordings from the hotel cameras, recordings he had used for leverage, for blackmail, and for sale. He didn't say a word. He asked for his attorney and sat in the back of the federal vehicle with the empty, deflated expression of a man who had always believed he was too connected to fall. The hotel was shut down, pending investigation. The staff were released with instructions not to leave the city. Meredith went home and cried for 3 hours. Vaughn, the security guard, called his wife and told her he was quitting the industry. The bellhops gathered at a bar 2 blocks away and drank in silence. Maren Calloway gave her statement over 6 hours. She spoke clearly, precisely, without tears, though Agent Farrow later said it was the steadiness, not the content, that shook her the most. When it was over, Farrow offered protective custody, a safe house, a new location, federal marshals. Maren said she'd think about it. It was after midnight when Maren walked out of room 418 for the last time. The 4th-floor hallway was transformed, yellow evidence tape across 3 doors, an agent stationed at each one end of the corridor, the lemongrass scent overwhelmed by the clinical plastic smell of evidence bags and latex gloves. She paused at the door of room 416. Through the slightly open doorway, she could see the forensic team working, 2 technicians in gloves carefully dismantling the smoke detector above the bed, another photographing the bathroom vent. They moved with the quiet precision of archaeologists, excavating something fragile and terrible. This was the room from the October 14th video. The room where the young woman had stood, with her arms crossed over her chest, looking at the door. Maren touched the door frame. She thought about all the rooms she had cleaned, thousands of them, over 2 years. She had made beds, replaced towels, emptied trash cans, wiped down surface. She had done it automatically, efficiently, the way you do any repetitive task until it becomes invisible. She had never thought about what happened in those rooms after she left. The rooms were just rooms. They were spaces that existed to be cleaned and reset, like stages between performances. But rooms remember. Even when the sheets are changed, and the surfaces wiped down, and the air freshened with lemongrass, rooms remember what happened inside them. The walls absorb it, the mirrors hold it, and sometimes, if you look closely enough, a woman with a cleaning cart and tired eyes can see what everyone else has missed. Maren walked past it all. She took the elevator down. Not the service elevator, the guest elevator, the glass one, the one that showed the atrium falling away beneath you like a dream you were waking from. The lobby was empty. The agents had finished their initial sweep. The guests had been relocated. The lights were still on, the chandeliers, the sconces, the geometric skylight now showing nothing but black sky. But the building felt hollow, a body without breath. Cassian was in the lobby. He was sitting in the same wingback chair where he'd been that afternoon, in the same position, as though the entire day had been a parenthesis and he was waiting for the sentence to resume. His espresso cup was gone. The table beside him was bare. He stood when he saw her. They faced each other across the lobby's expanse of marble, 50 feet of polished stone that had been walked on by guests in $1,000 shoes, by senators, by socialites, by the wealthy and the powerful and the people who served them. Maren crossed it in her borrowed sneakers. She stopped a few feet from him, close enough to speak quietly, far enough to breathe. "Farrow says it's bigger than this hotel," Maren said. "At least 4 other properties. They've been building this network for years." Cassian nodded. "It will take time." She also said, Marin paused. She said without the USB drive, they might never have gotten in. The server room was being wiped remotely when they arrived. Someone triggered a kill switch from outside. They saved about 60% of the data, but the original files on the drive, my files, and whoever added those recordings, those are the backbone of the case. Whoever put those files on your drive saved it, Cassian said. Someone on the inside, someone who worked here. Someone like me. Another invisible person. Yes. Silence settled between them, the kind of silence that comes after sustained noise, after the sirens and the warrants and the statements and the questions. The silence of aftermath. Your niece, Marin said. Cassian's face shifted, barely, but she saw it. The first real crack in his composure all day. Not pain, exactly. Something older than pain. Her name will be in those recordings, he said. Pharaoh confirmed it. Room 420, 3 nights. Marin closed her eyes. I'm sorry. Don't be. You didn't put the cameras there. You tried to stop them. And I failed. You failed the first time. You didn't fail today. Marin opened her eyes. She looked at him, really looked at him, without the filter of desperation or survival or the frantic calculus of who to trust. She saw a man who was capable of terrible things and who had today chosen not to do any of them. A man who could have walked through this hotel and torn it apart with his bare hands, and instead had stood in doorways and waited and listened and made phone calls. You said you're not a good man, she said. I'm not. Good men didn't help me. Good men looked away. Good men deleted my file and erased my name and told themselves it wasn't their problem. She paused. You showed up. You stayed. You didn't ask me to be grateful. You didn't ask me for anything. I asked you for the truth. That's not the same as asking for something. That's asking to be let in. Cassian looked at her for a long moment. The lobby was vast and empty around them, the marble floor reflecting the chandelier light in soft, fractured patterns. What will you do now? He asked. Marin considered. It was the first time in 3 weeks that anyone had asked her that question. The first time anyone had treated the future as something she had a say in. Pharaoh offered protective custody. I'm going to take it at least until the trial. After that, she shrugged. I don't know. Find another job. Find a place where I feel like a person and not a ghost. You have my number, Cassian said. Tova's too. If you need anything, legal representation, relocation, resources, call. Why? Because you walked through those doors today and you changed the trajectory of a federal investigation. Because my niece might get justice because of what you did. And because... He stopped, reconsidered, started again. Because someone should have been there for you 3 weeks ago. Someone should have listened to you the first time. They didn't. I can't fix that. But I can make sure you're not alone going forward. Marin didn't say thank you. She didn't cry. She didn't hug him, or shake his hand, or make a promise. She nodded. It was enough. Marin walked out the front door of the Belhavet at 12:47 in the morning. Not through the service entrance. Not through the loading dock, or the kitchen corridor, or any of the invisible pathways she had used every day for 2 years. The arteries of the building that kept it alive, while remaining hidden from the people who enjoyed it. She walked through the front door, the revolving glass doors that she had only ever seen from the inside, pushing her cart past while guests glided through in cashmere and cologne. The doorman was gone, sent home with the rest of the staff. The brass handles of the door were cold under her palms. She pushed through, and the October night opened up around her. The air was cold. It hit her face, and her bare arms, and the places where her borrowed sweatshirt gaped. She stood on the limestone steps and breathed, deep, full breaths, the kind she hadn't been able to take in 3 weeks because her ribs were bruised and her lungs were tight with fear. The smell of the city at night, exhaust, wet asphalt, the faint sweetness of fallen leaves in the gutter. It was ugly and real and uncurated, nothing like the bergamot and white cedar of the lobby, and it was the most beautiful thing she had breathed in 21 days. She looked up, The sky was overcast, the clouds reflecting the city's ambient light in a dull, orange glow. No stars. In Richmond, you rarely saw stars. The light pollution swallowed them, but she remembered that when she was a child, before her family moved to the city, she had lived in a house in the country where the night sky was thick with them. Her mother would hold her up at the bedroom window and point to constellations, naming them in a voice that made the universe feel small and safe. That was a long time ago, before the moves, the jobs, the steady erosion of stability that led her, eventually, to a housekeeping uniform and a cart full of clean towels. Before the Belle Havette. Before the cameras. Before the room with no windows and the sound of a lock turning from the outside. But the stars were still there. Behind the clouds, behind the light, you just couldn't see them. The city was still alive. Richmond doesn't sleep, not fully. There are always lights, always the distant sound of traffic, always the hum of a place that keeps going regardless of what happens inside its buildings. A federal agent was waiting by a dark sedan at the curb. He opened the passenger door. "Miss Calloway, I'm your transport to the safe house." Marin looked back at the hotel one last time. The Belle Havette stood tall and pale against the night sky, its limestone facade glowing under the floodlights, its lobby visible through the glass, like a stage after the play has ended. Lit, empty, waiting. She had entered this building for the first time 2 years ago, through the employee entrance on the south side, wearing a polyester uniform and carrying a bag lunch. She had been nervous and grateful and eager to do a good job. She had cleaned rooms and scrubbed bathrooms and made beds with hospital corners and never once complained. Because the job was steady and the tips were decent, and she was building something, a life, small and ordinary, but hers. They had taken that from her. They had taken her safety, her home, her name in the system, her body's right to not be hurt. They had taken 3 weeks of her life and replaced them with darkness and zip ties and the sound of a door locking from the outside. But they hadn't taken the USB drive. They hadn't taken what she knew, and they hadn't taken the thing that had brought her back to this building today. The thing that had kept her standing at the front desk while everyone laughed and looked away. The quiet, unshakable certainty that what happened in those rooms was wrong and that someone had to say so. Someone. Her. Marin Calloway got into the car. The agent closed the door. The sedan pulled away from the curb and merged into the nighttime traffic, its tail lights disappearing around the corner. The Belle Havette's lobby lights stayed on. They always did, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, a beacon of luxury and warmth and welcome. But tonight, for the first time, the building looked exactly like what it was, empty, 3 months later. The trial of Leland Prescott and 11 co-defendants began in federal court in January. The case, built on the digital evidence recovered from Marin Calloway's USB drive and the partial server data from the Belle Havette, was described by the lead prosecutor as one of the most significant hospitality sector trafficking cases in the eastern United States. Cordell Haight testified for the prosecution. He received a reduced sentence, 18 months in a minimum security facility and 5 years of supervised release. He never worked in hospitality again. 3 members of the Richmond Police Department were indicted on charges of corruption and obstruction of justice. 2 pleaded guilty. The third went to trial and was convicted. The Belle Havette Hotel was closed permanently. The property was purchased by a development company and converted into residential apartments. The geometric skylight was preserved. The marble lobby was not. 14 women were identified in the recordings recovered from the hotel's servers. 11 came forward to provide testimony. Their names were sealed by court order. The youngest was 19. She had been a college student attending a campus recruitment event hosted at the hotel. She had gone to bed in what she believed was a safe, clean room in a reputable establishment. She had undressed, showered, slept. All of it recorded. All of it transmitted to a server that fed content, to people who paid for the privilege of watching. She testified on a Tuesday morning in March. She wore a gray sweater and spoke so quietly, the court reporter asked her 3 times to repeat herself. When the defense attorney suggested she might have been aware of the cameras, she looked at him with an expression that the courtroom sketch artist later said was the hardest thing she'd ever had to draw. The judge sustained the prosecution's objection before it was even raised. Renata Matola was among them. Her testimony was given via closed-circuit video. She spoke for 40 minutes. When she was finished, she walked out of the federal building in Newark, got into her car, and drove to her uncle's house, where she stayed for dinner. They didn't talk about the trial. They talked about the garden she was planting in her backyard. Tomatoes, basil, something she could tend to and watch grow. Maren Calloway testified in person. She wore a navy blazer and dark trousers, clothes she had chosen herself from a store with money she had earned at her new job as an administrative assistant at a legal aid clinic in Northern Virginia. She had gained back the weight she'd lost. The bruises were gone. The cut on her jaw had healed into a thin white line that she could cover with makeup, but chose not to. She spoke for 3 hours. She did not cry. She described finding the cameras, reporting them, being fired, being stalked, being taken. She described the room where they kept her, the mildew, the gasoline, the zip ties. She described the 11 days in clinical, measured language that the jurors later said was more devastating than any tears could have been. When the defense attorney asked her why she had returned to the hotel that day, injured, alone with no guarantee of help, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Because the only thing worse than what happened to me would be letting it happen to someone else." The courtroom was silent. The defense attorney had no follow-up. The USB drive was entered into evidence as Exhibit 14. It was small, black, unmarked, no bigger than a thumb. The kind of thing you could hold in a closed fist, and no one would know it was there. But it held enough truth to bring down an empire. 1 year later, Maren was at her desk when the letter arrived. It was on plain white stationery, no return address, no printed letterhead. Inside was a single folded page, handwritten in precise, small script. "Miss Calloway, I was the one who put the files on your drive. I found it behind the toilet tank in 4183 days, after you were taken. I knew what it was. I knew what you had been trying to do. And I knew that if I didn't act, everything you had risked would disappear. I added the recordings because I had been copying them for months. Small amounts, transferred during my shifts, hidden on personal devices. I didn't know who to give them to. I didn't know who to trust. When I found your drive, I knew. I am no longer at the Belhaven. I have left the industry. I am safe. You don't know me and you don't need to. But I wanted you to know that when you walked back into that hotel, you were not alone. You were never alone. There were 2 of us." The letter was unsigned. Maren read it twice. She folded it carefully, placed it in the top drawer of her desk, and sat for a long time in the afternoon light. Then she stood up, put on her coat, and went back to work.